The sea was restless that morning, churning under a sky bruised with gray. Waves clawed at the Oregon shoreline, dragging foam and broken shells across the sand like a thief scattering stolen goods. Mist hung low, heavy, muffling the cries of gulls and softening the jagged edges of driftwood scattered like bones across the beach. The world felt paused, caught in the space between a breath drawn and a breath released. Harlon Crow stood at the edge of the dunes, hands buried in the pockets of his weathered jacket, his breath forming faint clouds in the cold dawn air. His boots sank slightly into the damp sand, grounding him in a place that had become both refuge and prison. Beside him, a boy no older than 12 crouched in the wet sand, arranging a fan of clamshells by size and color with the precision of a monk illuminating a manuscript. His name was Finian, but everyone called him Finn. He didn't speak much, didn't need to. Harlon had learned long ago that silence could carry more weight than words ever could. This was their ritual, these morning walks along the coast before the tourists arrived or the sun burned through the mist. Harlon liked it best this way, quiet, predictable, safe. The sea was a constant, its rhythm older than pain, older than regret. He'd come here 7 years ago to escape the noise of the world, the noise in his own head. He'd brought Finn, a boy who wasn't his by blood but was his by choice, after an accident stole everything else from them both. The cabin they called home was modest, tucked into the pines a mile from the trailhead, its tin roof patched with care, its walls lined with books and memories they didn't speak of. It was enough. It had to be. Finn froze suddenly, his hands hovering over a shell he'd been about to place. His eyes, sharp and blue-gray, locked onto something down by the water's edge. He pointed, a single finger cutting through the mist. Harlon followed his gaze, squinting. At first, he thought it was driftwood, maybe a torn sail or a lost tarp tangled in seaweed. But then he saw it, the outline of an arm, a pale hand, fingers curled slightly toward the sky, as if reaching for something just out of grasp. His heart lurched. "Stay here," he barked, his voice rougher than he meant. His boots pounded across the sand, each step sinking deeper as he ran toward the figure. She lay face down, her dark hair soaked and fanned out like kelp around her head. Harlon dropped to his knees, his hands trembling as he rolled her gently onto her back. Her face was ghost pale, lips tinged blue, her clothes clinging to her like a second skin. And her belly, God, she was pregnant, the swell unmistakable even through the sodden fabric. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, faint, fragile, like a bird trapped under ice. He scooped her into his arms, her body heavier than it looked, weighed down by seawater and the life she carried. Water dripped from her clothes, soaking into his jacket, cold against his chest. "I've got you," he whispered, though he wasn't sure she could hear. His boots ground into the wet sand as he carried her back toward Finn. "Get the blankets from the truck," Harlon said when he reached the boy. Finn didn't hesitate. He took off running toward the weathered pickup parked at the trailhead, his small frame disappearing into the mist. Harlon knelt, cradling the woman against his chest. Her breathing was shallow but steadying. Her eyes fluttered, then opened just a sliver, revealing a glint of fear and something else, determination, maybe, or defiance. She tried to speak, but no words came, only a soft whimper, a tear slipping down the curve of her cheek. "You're safe now," Harlon said, his voice softer than he expected, tender in a way he hadn't heard from himself in years. "I've got you." The drive back to the cabin was silent, save for the soft clicking of Finn's worry beads in the back seat. The woman lay bundled in every blanket they had, strapped into the passenger seat beside Harlon, her head lolling toward the window. She hadn't spoken, but her eyes, half open, held questions half-formed, half-drowned. The cabin came into view, its cedar walls weathered but sturdy, smoke curling from the chimney like a promise. Harlon carried her inside, laying her on the old pull-out sofa near the fireplace. Finn lit the kindling without being asked, the room filling with warmth and the faint scent of wood smoke. Harlon knelt beside her, brushing damp strands of hair from her forehead. "What's your name?" he asked gently. Her lips moved, a rasp escaping. "Saraphina." Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried weight, like a name spoken for the first time in years. "Saraphina," Harlon repeated softly, as if naming a newborn. "I'm Harlon. This is Finn. You washed up on the beach. Do you remember what happened?" She blinked slowly, her hand drifting to her swollen belly. They pushed me." The words hung in the air, small, dark, and full of violence, like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. Who? Harlon asked, his voice steady but edged with something sharper. Her eyes filled with terror, and she clutched his arm with surprising strength. Please, don't let them find me. Please. Harlon looked at Finn. The boy was watching them both, his expression unreadable, but something in his gaze, a quiet resolve, told Harlon what to do. You're safe here, he said, his voice firm. Whoever they are, they won't get through me. That night, rain began to drum against the cabin's roof, a steady rhythm that drowned out the world beyond the pines. Harlon sat by the fireplace, sipping lukewarm coffee, the mug warm against his calloused hands. Saraphina was asleep, her breathing steadier now, her cheeks regaining a faint flush of color. Finn had insisted on sleeping on the floor near her, a blanket wrapped around him like armor. Harlon watched them, the stranger and the son he'd rescued from wreckage years ago, and felt something stir in his chest, a memory, maybe, or something older, deeper. He rose quietly and stepped outside. The sea was dark, invisible under the night sky, but he could hear it, its constant, ancient rhythm. How many lives had it taken? How many had it given back? He thought of the baby growing inside Saraphina, of her words, "They pushed me." Someone had tried to kill her child. And yet, here she was, alive by his fire, her breath mingling with the crackle of the flames. Maybe it was chance. Maybe it was fate. Or maybe, as he'd begun to believe in small doses, life sometimes sent the broken back to the broken, not to be fixed, but to find what was left worth saving. He took one last breath of the salt-kissed night and whispered into the wind, "Whatever brought her here, I won't waste it." Morning broke with a wet hush, the storm having passed, leaving the forest and sea cloaked in quiet. Drops clung to pine needles, glistened along the edge of the cabin's tin roof, and tapped softly against the window panes. Saraphina opened her eyes slowly, her first breath sharp, pulling air into lungs that felt bruised. The warmth wrapped around her was unfamiliar, as was the rough flannel blanket that smelled faintly of wood smoke and salt. Her body ached, her head throbbed, and her belly, large, tight, and strangely still, reminded her she hadn't been dreaming. She turned her head. Finn sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, a spiral notebook open in his lap, his pencil moving with quiet focus. He wasn't drawing her, wasn't even looking at her, but there was something about his presence, steady, unintrusive, that calmed the screaming in her chest. She shifted slightly, and Finn looked up. Their eyes met. He didn't smile, didn't flinch, just stared with an intense, quiet presence, like someone who noticed everything but rarely spoke. "You're safe," a voice said gently from across the room. Saraphina startled. Harlon stood near the stove, stirring something in a dented pot. His flannel shirt was tucked loosely into jeans, his hair dark with silver streaks at the temples, his face weathered but steady. He looked like the kind of man who fixed broken fences and meant every word he said. "You remember anything?" Harlon asked, setting the spoon down and walking slowly toward her. She tried to sit up but winced. "Take it easy," he said. "You hit the rocks hard. Probably some bruised ribs. You're lucky to be alive." Alive. The word hit like a slap. Her hand flew to her stomach. "The baby?" "She's fine," Harlon said calmly. "Strong heartbeat. I called a nurse I trust. She talked me through what to check for. You'll both need to see someone soon, but for now, she's hanging in there." Saraphina exhaled, her hands still on her belly. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, in a whisper, "They tried to kill us." Harlon nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. "I'm Harlon. This here's Finn. You already told me your name." "Saraphina." She nodded slowly. "Where am I?" "Oregon coast. About 20 miles from Seaview. Closest neighbors 4 miles out. You washed up near our trailhead." Saraphina closed her eyes. She remembered the yacht, the heated argument, the hand on her back, the jolt as she hit the water, the desperate flail toward the surface, and then nothing. "I can't go back," she said suddenly. "I won't." "You don't have to," Harlon replied, his voice low, steady, like someone who knew what it meant to run from something you couldn't name, only feel. The days that followed unfolded like pages in a slow, quiet novel, each one edged in mist and small acts of grace. Saraphina spent most of her time near the window seat, legs curled beneath her, hands always resting on her belly as if to anchor herself to something real. Outside, the Oregon coast remained wild, indifferent, the sea breathing in and out, dragging driftwood up and down the shore like a mother rocking a restless child. Harlon kept busy chopping firewood, checking crab traps, tending the vegetable patch out back. He spoke little but with intention, and when he did, he looked her in the eye, not around or through her. That was new, grounding. Finn hovered on the periphery, never intrusive, never absent. His presence was like sunlight through fog, gentle but steady. Every morning, he set out to collect shells or smooth stones. Every afternoon, he returned with something carefully chosen, a piece of driftwood shaped like a heart, a sand dollar, a feather so soft and white Saraphina thought it had come from a dream. He placed each beside her teacup without a word, then retreated to his notebook, his pencil scratching softly against the paper. One morning, after a night of strange, half-submerged dreams, Saraphina stepped into the kitchen and found Finn at the table, drawing. The cabin was quiet, the fire low, the air crisp with pine and sea salt. She poured herself tea and sat across from him. Neither spoke at first. But something had shifted in her, maybe the baby kicking with renewed vigor, or the first full night of sleep she'd had in weeks, or just the warmth of a place where no one asked her to explain herself. She looked at his drawing, a lighthouse stark against a stormy sky. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Finn didn't respond immediately. He added a streak of yellow near the top, light from the tower, then handed her the pencil. "Your turn." She blinked, surprised. "I'm not an artist." He shrugged. "No rules." Something about the way he said it made her smile. She picked up the pencil and slowly shaded in the waves beneath the lighthouse, careful not to disrupt his lines. "No rules," she echoed. Later that day, Harlon returned from the post office with supplies, canned goods, dry firewood, and a box of maternity clothes from the town church. He handed them to Saraphina without comment, but she noticed the way he lingered by the doorway, unsure whether to step in or out. "I could have gone with you," she offered, sensing his hesitation. He shook his head. "Not yet. Word travels fast around here." She looked down. "You think he's looking for me?" Harlon nodded. "I think he's always looking. Men like that don't let go. Especially not when they think you're carrying something that belongs to them." Her hand went to her belly, not from fear this time, but protectiveness. "He doesn't get to decide who she belongs to," she whispered. Harlon's gaze softened. He set the supplies down, then pulled a small bundle of dried lavender from his coat pocket. "For your pillow," he said. "Might help you sleep." Saraphina stared at it, then at him. "You're not what I expected." "Neither are you," he replied, and disappeared outside with the empty crates. The wind changed one morning, not with the fury of a gale, but with a quiet shift, a current that stirred pine needles and set the chimes above the porch into an uneasy song. Harlon noticed it first, standing near the woodshed, axe in hand, mid-swing. A chill swept across his shoulders, and he paused, eyes narrowing toward the trail that led to the main road. Nothing but trees and silence, but his gut whispered, not for long. Inside, Saraphina hummed softly while folding baby clothes, tiny socks, pastel onesies, soft flannel blankets donated by the town's charity bin. Finn sat beside her, organizing everything by color, then size, his hands steady, his focus absolute. The door creaked open, and Harlon stepped in, wiping his hands on a rag. His face was unreadable, but Saraphina noticed the stiffness in his shoulders. "Everything okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Storm coming." She tilted her head. "I thought the weather looked clear." "Not that kind of storm." Saraphina froze. She saw it then, the darkness threading behind his eyes. It wasn't the ocean he was worried about. It was the past and the men who knew how to weaponize silence. That afternoon, Harlon drove into Seaview for supplies, a rare trip he didn't want to make but couldn't avoid. He needed to check the mail and pick up medication the nurse had arranged for Saraphina. "You sure?" she asked, her voice low as he packed a duffel with canned goods and propane cartridges. He looked at her. "Can't hide forever. Besides, people ask fewer questions if I keep up my routine." She stepped closer. "Be careful." He nodded, then paused. "If anything happens, anything at all, you take Finn and the emergency bag and go straight into the tree line. There's a path behind the garden. It leads to the old ranger station." You remember where the key is? She nodded, her throat tight. Harlon looked between her and Finn. I'll be back before dusk. He wasn't lying, but he wasn't entirely sure either. Seaview was quiet, weathered, suspicious of strangers but loyal to its own. The clerk at the general store gave him a polite nod. The postmaster handed over a stack of mail ads, bills, and one envelope at the bottom that made him pause. No return address, elegant handwriting. He slipped it into his jacket without reading it and finished his errands in silence. Back at the cabin, dusk settled like a heavy sigh. Saraphina paced near the front windows, one hand on her belly, the other clutching the cordless phone Harlon had left. The shadows outside lengthened. Finn noticed her tension and walked to the old record player, placing a worn vinyl on the turntable. A gentle melody filled the room, strings and piano soft as falling snow. Saraphina turned, surprised. You like this music? She asked. Finn shrugged. It's calming. It is, she agreed, letting the melody soften the edges of her fear. Then headlights broke through the tree line. She exhaled, thinking it was Harlon. But as the vehicle pulled up, her breath caught. It wasn't his truck. The SUV was sleek, black, out of place among the pines and gravel. The engine idled for a moment before the driver stepped out, a tall man in a charcoal suit, expensive and dry despite the damp air. His hair was sharp, his movements sharper. He walked toward the porch, a man not used to being denied. Saraphina pulled Finn behind her and opened the door just a crack. Mrs. Vale, the man said, smiling without warmth. You've been difficult to locate. She said nothing. I'm not here to make a scene, he continued. Mr. Vale, your husband, would like to offer a compromise. A peaceful solution, one that ensures your comfort, your safety, and the child's future. She held the door tighter. You were reported lost at sea, he said, his voice smooth, practiced. Your return will raise questions, headlines, court investigations. But if you sign a statement saying you left voluntarily, Mr. Vale will ensure you're provided for. Generously. Finn's hand slipped into hers. She squeezed it tightly. I have nothing to say, she replied coldly. The man's smile thinned. He can make this very difficult for you. I've already survived difficult, she said. Tell him that. She shut the door and locked it. Harlon returned 20 minutes later. Saraphina met him at the door, eyes blazing. They found me, she said. His jaw clenched. Who? Your guess is as good as mine. But they knew my name. Knew I was here. He exhaled slowly. I'll handle it. How? She demanded. They won't stop. Harlon's voice was even. Then we don't stop either. He walked to the fireplace, pulled a small lockbox from the mantel, and opened it. Inside were documents, maps, a burner phone, a flash drive. She stared. You were planning to run. I was planning for this moment, he said. In case the past came looking. He handed her a key. Tomorrow, I teach you the trail. If I'm not here, you go. Saraphina held the key tightly, something steely rising in her chest. She looked at Finn, standing in the doorway, watching them both. I'm not leaving without all of us, she said. Harlon gave a slow nod. The storm was here. But this time, they would not be swept away. The rain came just after midnight, not a drizzle, but a storm with memory. Thunder rolled in from the Pacific like an ancient beast waking from slumber. Winds howled through the trees, bending pines like brittle reeds. Rain slammed against the windows in sheets, and the sea beyond the cliffs roared louder than any warning. Inside the cabin, the fireplace struggled to compete with the fury outside, its flames dancing against shadows that stretched long across the floor. Harlon stood at the front door, one hand on the frame, his jaw set tight. His instincts, sharpened by years on the water, told him something was coming. But it wasn't from the storm. It was from within. Saraphina gripped the edge of the table, her eyes wide, breath sharp. The first contraction had nearly dropped her to her knees. The second came 5 minutes later. Now they were closer, heavier, unmistakable. It's happening, she whispered, her voice trembling. Harlon turned to her, calm but focused. How far apart? Maybe 3-4 minutes, she gasped. He didn't hesitate. He crossed the room, gently but firmly guiding her toward the pull-out bed near, and Finn took off toward the trailhead, his small frame vanishing into the mist. Harlon knelt, cradling her against his chest, her breathing shallow but steadying. Her eyes fluttered, then opened just a sliver, revealing fear laced with defiance. She tried to speak, but only a whimper escaped, a tear tracing her cheek. You're safe now, Harlon said, his voice softer than he'd expected, tender in a way he hadn't felt in years. I've got you. The drive back was silent, save for the soft clicking of Finn's worried beads in the back seat. Saraphina lay bundled in blankets, strapped into the passenger seat, her head lolling toward the window. Her eyes, half open, held questions unspoken, half-drowned. The cabin came into view, its cedar walls weathered but sturdy, smoke curling from the chimney. Harlon carried her inside, laying her on the pull-out sofa near the fireplace. Finn lit the kindling without being asked, the room warming with the scent of wood smoke. Harlon knelt beside her, brushing damp hair from her forehead. What's your name? He asked gently. Her lips moved, a rasp escaping. Saraphina. Saraphina, he repeated, as if anchoring her to the moment. I'm Harlon. This is Finn. You washed up on the beach. Do you remember what happened? She blinked slowly, her hand drifting to her belly. They pushed me. The words hung heavy, dark with unspoken violence. Who? Harlon asked, his voice steady but edged. Her eyes filled with terror, and she clutched his arm. Please, don't let them find me. Harlon glanced at Finn, the boy's unreadable gaze steady. You're safe here, Harlon said. They won't get through me. That night, rain drummed the roof, a steady rhythm drowning the world beyond. Harlon sat by the fire, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching Saraphina sleep, her breathing steadier, her cheeks regaining color. Finn curled up on the floor nearby, a blanket wrapped around him like armor. Harlon studied them, the stranger and the boy he'd saved from wreckage years ago, and felt something stir, a memory, or something older. He stepped outside, the sea dark and invisible, its rhythm eternal. How many lives had it taken? How many had it spared? He thought of Seraphina's baby, her words, they pushed me. Someone had tried to end her child. Yet here she was, alive by his fire. Chance, fate, or something else, life, maybe, sending the broken to the broken, not to mend, but to salvage what remained. He whispered into the wind, whatever brought her here. I won't waste it. Morning broke with a wet hush, the storm passed, the forest and sea cloaked in quiet. Drops clung to pine needles, glistened on the cabin's tin roof, tapped the window panes. Seraphina woke slowly, her breath sharp, lungs bruised. The flannel blanket smelled of wood smoke and salt, unfamiliar but warm. Her body ached, her head throbbed, her belly tight and still. She turned to see Finn on the floor, sketching in a notebook, his focus calming her racing heart. She shifted, and he looked up, his blue-gray eyes steady, wordless. You're safe, Harlon said from across the room, stirring a pot on the stove. His flannel shirt hung loose, his face weathered but kind, a man who fixed what was broken and meant what he said. You remember anything? He asked, approaching slowly. She tried to sit up, winced. Take it easy, he said. You hit the rocks hard. Bruised ribs, probably. You're lucky to be alive. Alive. The word struck her. Her hand flew to her belly. The baby? She's fine, Harlon said. Strong heartbeat. I called a nurse I trust. You'll need a doctor soon, but she's holding on. Seraphina exhaled, hands still on her belly. Then, quietly, they tried to kill us. Harlon nodded, jaw tight. I'm Harlon. This is Finn. You told me your name. Saraphina. She nodded. Where am I? Oregon coast. 20 miles from Seaview. Neighbors 4 miles out. You washed up near our trailhead. She closed her eyes, memories flooding, the yacht, the argument, the hand on her back, the cold water, the fight to surface, then nothing. I can't go back, she said. I won't. You don't have to, Harlon said, his voice a lifeline. Days passed like pages in a quiet novel, edged in mist and grace. Saraphina stayed by the window seat, hands on her belly, grounding herself. The sea outside was wild, indifferent, rocking driftwood like a restless child. Harlon worked, chopping wood, checking traps, tending the garden, speaking little but looking her in the eye, a new kind of anchor. Finn hovered, gentle but steady, collecting shells, stones, a feather, placing each by her teacup without a word. One morning, after restless dreams, Saraphina found Finn sketching a lighthouse against a stormy sky. She sat across from him, tea in hand. "It's beautiful," she said. He added a yellow streak light, then handed her the pencil. "Your turn." "I'm not an artist," she said, surprised. "No rules," he shrugged. She smiled, shading the waves carefully. "No rules." Later, Harlon returned with supplies and maternity clothes from the church. He lingered by the door. "I could have gone with you," Saraphina said. "Not yet. Word travels fast." "You think he's looking for me?" "Men like that don't let go," Harlon said. "Not when they think something's theirs." Her hand rested protectively on her belly. "He doesn't decide who she belongs to." Harlon softened, handing her dried lavender. "For your pillow. Might help you sleep." "You're not what I expected," she said. "Neither are you," he replied, stepping outside. The wind shifted one morning, subtle but uneasy, stirring chimes on the porch. Harlon paused mid-swing by the woodshed, eyes on the trail. Silence, but his gut warned, not for long. Inside, Saraphina folded baby clothes, Finn organizing them. Harlon entered, tense. "Storm coming," he said. "The weather's clear," she said. "Not that kind." She froze, seeing the darkness in his eyes. That afternoon, he drove to Seaview for supplies and mail. "Be careful," she said. "If anything happens," he said, "take Finn and the emergency bag to the ranger station. You know the path." She nodded, throat tight. "I'll be back before dusk," he promised. Seaview was quiet, loyal to its own. The postmaster handed Harlon mail, including an envelope with elegant handwriting, no return address. He pocketed it and drove the long way home, needing time to think. At the cabin, Saraphina paced, clutching the phone. Finn played a soft vinyl, calming her. Then headlights pierced the trees, not Harlan's truck, but a sleek black SUV. A man in a suit approached, sharp and cold. "Mrs. Vale," he said. "You've been difficult to locate." She stood firm, Finn behind her. "I'm not here to make a scene," he said. "Mr. Vale offers a compromise. Sign a statement you left voluntarily, and you'll be provided for." "I have nothing to say," she said. "He can make this difficult," he warned. "I've survived difficult," she shot back, locking the door. Harlon returned, and she told him. "They found me." "I'll handle it," he said, opening a lockbox with documents, a burner phone, a flash drive. "Tomorrow, I teach you the trail. If I'm not here, you go." "I'm not leaving without all of us," she said. He nodded. The storm was here, but they wouldn't break. Rain hit after midnight, a storm with memory, thunder roaring, winds bending pines, sea raging. Inside, the fire flickered. Harlon stood by the door, senses sharp. Saraphina gripped the table, a contraction buckling her. "It's happening," she gasped. "How far apart?" Harlon asked. 3-4 minutes. He guided her to the pull-out bed. "No hospital?" she asked, fear in her voice. "Roads are washed out. We've got this." He hesitated. "I helped once, years ago." She nodded, trusting him. Finn fetched the emergency kit, spreading towels, placing water and a flashlight nearby, his hand steady. "Is this okay for him?" Saraphina asked. "He's seen worse," Harlon said. "He's staying present." Lightning cracked. Saraphina screamed. The labor was fast, brutal, her body strained by trauma. "I can't," she cried. "You can," Harlon said. "You're not alone." Finn placed a damp cloth on her brow. She grabbed his hand, and he nodded. Another push, then a cry, small, raw, alive. Harlon wrapped the baby in a towel, handing her to Saraphina. "She's perfect," he said, voice breaking. Saraphina cradled her, trembling. "I didn't think we'd make it." "You did," Harlon said. "She's here." The storm raged, but the cabin glowed. Saraphina named her Grace, whispering, "You're the reason I lived." Finn sketched them by the fire, saying, "She'll change everything." Harlon stepped to the window, scanning the forest. No headlights, but his gut nod. Not yet, he thought. But soon. Weeks passed, Grace growing, the cabin alive with her cries. Saraphina found her mother's locket, tangled in her hair when Harlon saved her. "You kept it," she said. "Didn't want to remind you until you were ready," he said. "I don't know if I am." "It's yours. The story's yours." She wore it, a badge, not a chain. They drove to Seaview, filing Saraphina's statement against Luther Vale, her husband, a man with wealth and reach. "I already have protection," she told the clerk, smiling at Harlon. Life evolved. Finn carved Grace's cradle. Saraphina sang lullabies. Harlon taught her to shoot, preparing for storms without clouds. "One evening," she said, "you saved my life." "You saved your own," he said. "No," she insisted. "You pulled me from the water. You trusted me." He looked at her, weight lifting. "I didn't know what I was saving. Now I do." She leaned against his shoulder, the tide rolling in, the cabin home. Years later, Grace, now 18, stood before Vale Global Industries, invited to speak on empathy in business. Luther, her biological father, frail but sharp, met her. "I thought you'd look like me," he said. "I don't," she replied. He handed her a letter, written years ago, admitting his wrongs. She gave him a frayed blanket corner. "My mother kept this, believing in me, not you. I forgive you, for me, not you." On stage, she spoke, "I was born into a storm, but storms pass. What matters is what we build." The crowd was silent, moved. Luther left her his estate, $180 million. She called Harlon. "I don't know what to do." "Choose what doesn't cost more than it gives," he said. Back home, she proposed the Waves of Grace Foundation for single parents, trauma survivors, neurodiverse youth. She signed the estate over, refusing corporate power, redirecting it to healing. Finn engraved a nameplate, "This is where Grace lives." At the foundation's launch, Harlon spoke, "Grace didn't just grow up here. She grew us." Grace added, "This land was my rescue. Now it's someone else's." That night, on the porch, Grace whispered, "I'll come back every season." "You'd better," Harlon said. She walked to the shore, the locket around her neck, and thanked the journey, the salt, the waves, the love that chose to stay. "I was never lost," she said. "I was waiting for the tide to turn."